Hello, my name is Sonja Montiel. I am the founder of College Confidence. I am an educator, a mother of a fifth grader and first-year college student, wife to my high school sweetheart, and a soccer player through and through.
And I'm Hilary Bilbrey, inspired living strategist, author, speaker, mama to 3 teenagers, wife, and adventure seeker. You know, some things are just meant to be. Although we met randomly in a class, Sonja and I really became clear that our work, our values, and our heart align. Soon we began talking about our families and our worries and our businesses, our lives, and we realized we were helping each other move forward into our own confidence and integrity.
We understand that many people have this fear of showing such vulnerabilities that you and I were able to get to so quickly, and it's because of that alignment. But that vulnerability and those conversations are really a way to get to the heart of the matter. And so Decided Heart was born, and this is why we would love to invite you to join our conversations.
Welcome to another conversation with Sonja and myself, Hilary. We were talking last week about tribes and your identity and how within this sisterhood or the groups that you surround yourself with, you really find who you are and the importance of choosing wisely the groups that you find yourself. And as we were talking, it really occurred to Sonja that so much of her identity, as well as her tribe, stems from her original tribe, which starts with our very special guest, Claudine, who's going to talk to us a little bit today also about her identity as a twin, but how who she is has gone on to inform what she does out in the world and makes her look at the world in a way that is more inclusive of bringing people into that circle as well. So with that, Sonja, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about who this amazing woman is. I'm already excited to meet her.
Me too. I'm excited to meet her every day when I see her. And so yes, so Claudine Jaenichen, we're gonna have to transfer that name a bit. My sister and I, we were named sister as we were growing up. So as part of our identity formation is our parents decided that we would call each other by our roles. So you're gonna hear instead of Claudine Jaenichen or Claudine is sister. So whenever I say sister, it's this beautiful woman right here. And great memory I have of her, because I do college counseling as a profession, is I've observed her unfold as this beautiful person who's translated art into something right now that is changing lives from everything from an individual to a family to a country. And so, sister, I can't wait to hear your work with information design and emergency management. You're training FEMA staff right now across the nation. Love to, from your words, because I say it all the time, like how that transformation happened, starting with your identity as a twin, because I got to process my identity as a twin last episode, so now it's your turn. So welcome, sister.
Thank you. I am so honored to be in this group. I've been watching your episodes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just love being able to share this conversation. So thank you so much for both of you for inviting me. I mean, did we have a choice? Just from birth, getting called sister. I mean, our parents, if anything, I think the one critical thing they did was just anchor us to each other. And it's never been wavered in any, I can't even remember. I see my self-identity is always with my sister growing up. It wasn't maybe until college, maybe end of high school, that we started to feel this sense of like, oh, we have our own sense of identity. But I have to share this story because the story with my sister and I, we were about, I would say like 8, we were really young. She was really into Barbies. She just loved playing Barbies. She always wanted her Barbies. And I loved G.I. Joes, for those of you who remember those, and GoBots, which is like Transformers. And she desperately wanted to play with me. And so one of the first memories I have as sort of being separate or different is she liked to dress the same also. And I was like, oh, okay, whatevs, we'll do this for a little bit. But, and that's the first time I noticed like, oh, I like this and you like this, but how could that be? We're twins. So she came in one time and she said, sister, I really want to play with you. And I'm like, okay. And I made her Barbies be the bad guys as I shot them down with my GoBots. and my GI Joes. And she remembers this, and she didn't love it, did not love it. I loved it, but it was like this kind of negotiating between this identity of being so unified, not really seeing a separate entity. And then, you know, when you go through puberty, when you're starting to have your self-interest, you start to negotiate that. And I remember that as one of the pivotal points. But also, it was a part where I started to get really into disasters. So I called my calling now, my 9-year-old self being so enthralled with disasters. I did not like art. I did not want to be a graphic designer. I did not want to go to art school. In high school, I announced to our parents, as my sister announced that she wanted to be a doctor, and they're just like,
yeah, just to appease. I wanted them to validate me.
Obedient daughter.
Obedient daughter. And our parents were so great. Like, I'm like, oh, they're going to be like, you know, equal. And I told them I wanted to be a forest firefighter. And it was, do you remember that? It was dead silence in the car. It was our graduation dinner. And they're just like, I was like, where's my, they didn't even pretend to do that. So, but it was really an epiphany for me. I really did not want, art was never really part of my vocabulary at that age. I wanted to go out, hold a hose, you know, save a deer. And that my parents were like, you know, we quietly will support you because we've always done that all your life, but we're really going to push you in this art school direction. And it did happen. I went to Cal Arts, which is a really intense private art school, and went into graphic design, did graphic design, graduated, started working in the field, and then joined Search and Rescue because I am stubborn.
But can I just add, so a memory there is, even though she went to Cal Arts, she still inserted herself within that culture. I hung out there a lot. So, and speaking of tribe, her tribe was always automatically my tribe. So I went to UCSB. It was about an hour and a half drive. I was there every weekend. And she inserted her Star Wars, and Cal Arts they don't have no football team, but yet there she was, like the leader of creating this pseudo football team. I think you guys didn't even play football, right, sis? I don't know.
Soccer.
It was soccer.
Yeah, yep.
Such a rebel in every sense of that. So you always, no matter what like other institution you're placed, you still said, well, I'm inserting myself here. So I thought that was really cool.
And that's such an interesting, so listening to Sonja too, and now listening to you as well, even though Sonja was talking about maybe as she was younger, not being quite as certain with identity, but growing into that, she said there really was always with the two of you this support, this unconditional understanding that you could be and have space to be who you needed to be. There's so many young women especially who would not be confident enough to speak up the way that you did, or to be able to insert themselves or assert, really, I'm going to use the word assert themselves and be, you know, assertive is not aggressive. Assertive is holding one's own truth, right? Speaking one's own truth. And I'm fascinated by, how did that come to be? How were you there's so many people that are out there that are not, young women and men alike, and I coach them, where the confidence is not there. Sonja gave so much of that credit, she thinks, to the grounding the two of you have in one another, of knowing that you have a soft place to fall as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think, my partner is an MFT, so I'm going to use this term that makes me sound smarter than I am, but we had a good attachment. When I really look back, I feel like, you know what, so my sister and I are definitely, we are not confrontational. So like, I love that you said that assertion is not aggressive. We are I'm like the least person that wants to speak, you know, against something. It's a very quiet, but more the confidence that comes out, and learning to follow your intuition and your truth. But I definitely think it was from it's to this day, it's just this unconditional, I don't know how many people can experience this unconditional support and love, and knowing someone is just going to be there for you. But also our dad, single father, you know, he worked graveyard raising these twin girls. He also modeled quiet assertion and confidence. Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah. I
he
never
was a model for us when it came to that.
What did you say? It was quiet assertion? Yeah, I mean, that's where I say, wow, he was the best soccer coach we ever had. It was because
I was just going to say that.
I never realized, but it was because he would just nod, or he would just have these quiet conversations that we didn't have to get all emotional.
Yeah.
Things were a little bit disarray. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I think between those two things, I would attribute that to those two things.
And is that something then, do you think having that foundation has helped you now to be able to really tune into that, knowing when someone else comes into your life, you can feel what the right energy feels like, and you can feel what energy that would pull you off that?
I definitely think so. It makes you more sensitive to other. I have a lot of empathy. I have a lot of safe space for people. I just have that empathy for people, and I just could read a room really well. I mean, I teach 15 years now, and I feel like that kind of openness and sensitivity to that makes me a better teacher as well, because I'm dealing with 24 individuals, adults, but still young adults. And that could be really dramatic. And I think that kind of, I wouldn't even call it a skill. It's like an intuition, or because if you're grown into it, you kind of just, that's all you know. And that openness that you have, especially I only had one sibling. I only have, one sibling that I've never knew what it was like to really fight or have, build walls or anything that I've seen in other relationships. So I do feel like it definitely helps with other people how to read. I call it read the room, but you could, like you said, you could see the personalities pretty quickly, and and also the tribe or not. So at Hilary, like I'm like, if my sister, also that trust that her and I have, it's all through elementary school with our friends. Like if it's good with you, it's and there's a sense of trust there too.
I wanted,
go ahead.
Something came up, and I mean, between you and I, sis, you did have a lot more courage and assertiveness growing up than I did. And you're right, maybe it's more of that intuition that you were born with, because I was like, how does she get that? And, when, you had to come out as an individual in really dramatic ways, especially with our immigrant parents who had very traditional ways of being.
Yeah.
And, that took not just normal courage, it took extra courage and the way that you claimed your sense of identity was so admired by that, because I would have been so scared out of my mind. I think because of the obedient daughter thing, I'd be like, nothing to see here, folks, and I'm 45, nothing to see here. And you're just like, I claim my stake, this is who I am. And off you go into your adult world. You continue to, like you said, that empathy and that scanning, and also the protection, because I know how protective you are of your time with your family. It's really incredible. And I don't know if it was a fight that made your work so much more meaningful today.
That's, when I thought about that too, we've never talked about this. So I thought about why I felt like I had the young sister syndrome. That's a thing, right? Is that a thing? Can we look that up?
It's on
And I really felt in a lot of ways, even though my sister is 12 minutes older, I just announced that to the world, she shielded me at a lot of the hard stuff. There was hard stuff. We lived all over the world when we were young. I heard things went down that I don't even remember, but my sister was my protector. And honestly, sister, I think this is it. You you took a lot of that outside world stuff. Why I got to play with my G.I. Joes. I really thought about this one time, and I thought, this is why I have that more, zany. I kind of go and lower in a bit, like my inhibitions are, just out the window, and because you gave me that space. And so there's also that, even with twins, at least in our relationship, there was still that dynamic where there was a protector, the older sister. Till this day, we make jokes about it in our family, and that allowed me to be a little bit more wacky and make crazy decisions. The art school stereotype, but we still see this today, even as sort of like we're both parents now, and we carried that into our parenting and stuff. So that I really thought. I mean, I don't know what you thought. I don't know, Hilary, if you ever heard of this kind of dynamic, but I really feel like that gave me that space to play more.
No, I think that's so interesting. What do you think of that, Sonja? Have you ever thought of that?
It's interesting. we again, like, we haven't really talked deeply about this before, and so now it's gonna be like, you know, in a public episode, which is awesome. You've hinted it, that I was like the protector, the shielder. I consider myself a nurturer. Like, I was the mother role in the household. I didn't see myself, and a lot of the memories my sister mentions, I really can't remember that. So maybe it was just kind of like, things are getting rough, superpower shield. And yeah, so that's kind of it's a cool kind of revelation to think about and ponder a little bit more on.
Well, and when you do stop and think about that, I think we step into, based on our identity, what we've experienced, what's around us, we step into some of these roles. We bring our gifts to these roles, and it can shape and change the things around us because of that. And Claudine, what you ended up going in and doing, I would love to hear a little bit more about that and the inclusiveness that you have in your approach to the work that you do. Because I called Sonja, I was listening to one of your talks, and I called Sonja afterwards, and I'm like, oh my God, she's talking about coming up with all of the people she's trying to, what do they look like? What are they like? What are their needs? How am I going to help them? And I'll let you explain more about it. But once you know who they are, you invite them into the room to stay there as you're designing what their exit strategy is going to be in an emergency, so you want to make sure you have recognized the person who is in the wheelchair, the person who is elderly, you invite them into the room. I loved that image. And when you ask them to say, can you tell me about what that process is, and how you feel that who you are has made you open up to that inclusivity?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm so passionate about this. I'm such an advocate of this because, you know, I've worked with a lot of emergency management, the California Governor's Office, FEMA, and this is my university, like every institute, the elementary school, everything's top down. And it's everything that we're doing wrong is not including the people that it's intended for to be in the decision-making room. And I got my graduate degree in England, so I will blame part of it there, because I also was not eyes wide open until I went to England and got my degree in information design, where it's inviting other disciplines other than designers. And at first, like, how could you make a design decision? I'm the designer, you're the right, you know, it was all very territorial. And then I went to England and all those walls were broken down. And it just literally re-evaluated everything that I was doing. And then to come back and see with, you know, different lens, how everything is set up. And it's no wonder that we're having such miscommunication and confusion. And, you know, it's because of this top down, and it's not the fault. I'm not blaming the institutions. It's the way that they've sort of, the culture of it. I will say, when I was in search and rescue, it's very authoritative culture. Emergency management also, it's very much about rule following, and I did it for almost 2 years. And one of the trainings was Swiftwater training. So you get specializations. So I got my EMT license and I did avalanche training, California girl, like all these different specialties. So one was Swiftwater. I did really well in the book work, where you have to fill out worksheets and read, and I'll, like, you know, ace that. Then technical work in pools and lakes. But then the third part was Kern River up north, which is like class 4s, you know, whitewater. And that weekend I had to get rescued. They literally had to change that, because of me, a training for the final certification into a rescue. And that's the first time I was humbled, because I didn't, you know, I was like, I'm going to be a search and rescue person, and design's going to be my secondary life. And that's the moment I was humbled and got me to England to grad school, because I felt what it was to panic. I felt what it was. That's what the cognition part that I deal with so much really pinpointed from that experience. Is I did everything that I learned killed people. I mean, at the same time, I'm sure, like, that's really difficult to do, but I did it all at once. And then I was on the side of the hill and I thought, I'm going to go back to design now. How can I merge, instead of keeping my disciplines separate, how can I merge these two things together? There's got to be a way. And that's where I spent my grad program investigating that.
I have to tell you before I want you to continue on, but it's so funny, on the same wavelength here. As you were doing that, I wrote down the word humility before you said humble. And I think that that's the piece that's missed so much. And even, you know, we're looking at some of the race riots that are going on right now and some of the other things that we see. This goes back to a conversation I had years ago, just really quickly. And Sonja, you've heard me tell this story before. There was an entrepreneur that I met who was also a philanthropist, and he was putting solar panels on the top of roofs in schoolhouses in Africa. I said, "Oh, that's amazing. That's teaching people how to fish." And he said, "Yes, but first you have to find out whether or not they like to eat fish." Such a profound moment. And we got into these deep discussions about how often well-intentioned people assume, which is actually arrogance without us intending for it to be, assume we know what's best for everyone else, but have the humility to ask, bring them in the room.
I mean, I just spent, and I learned, you know, all the assumptions and all the, you know, I still have to remind myself, Claudine, slow down. Did you ask, you know, I always not fight, but argue for a process where they include people that they're talking to as part of the process. And it is a hard fight. And I have to constantly remind them, like, well, how do you know that they can read that typeface? How do you know that color, you know, even for basic things like color blindness, which is 10% of the population is colorblind. And you're using these color combinations that would disappear, make invisible half the information. It's interesting, during my FEMA talk, they did not have an interpreter, a sign language person on that deck. And here I am on stage talking about inclusive, you know, and there's no one there to speak to those who are hearing impaired. It's, you know, I don't want it to be the afterthought. I'm trying to make that at the get-go, like even when I'm teaching my students, the foundation should be inclusive design. I don't even like the word inclusive. I don't like this other. It should just be all thinking about it at the same time. And I give lectures on this too, because I want the generation, the culture shifts when you can change the younger generation to be like, what do you mean you're not thinking about this? This is ridiculous. You're not thinking about this first, you know? So yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the language, the tone, everything, you have to go back and ask, you know, it's a tapestry of people too. So that makes it really challenging. And maybe becomes overwhelming for people in decision-making roles to say, how do we say, put on a mask? All this stuff that I saw in COVID, you know, in the very initial March, there were, you know, young people are not putting their masks on, and, you know, they're already starting to territorial in the media. And I told panic buying. You know, I even heard when I was at a Stater Brothers, someone behind me is like, just how are these people they're so stupid for not getting the stuff done when they're supposed to, just judging each other. And I thought, this is cognition at its, I could dissect this exactly how people would react. And it's because the messaging was so unclear, so disconnected, inconsistent, that this starts to happen, that crowd psychology, the paralysis, you know. So the blame game for me is, I go back to our decision makers, and like, I look at them, I don't look at us. We're just following, you know, the paths that you're making for us. So that's where I'm trying to anchor myself as an translator or interpreter between the intention, the well-intentioned decision makers, and then what actually happens on the ground.
And then just before we shift, just to make it more clear to our listeners or viewers, is one thing I learned where you did fire evacuation maps. I think fire evacuation maps, tsunami mapping, and the accidental arrogance is that the higher ups are saying, well, do it as is. Put every street, every line on a map. That's the reality of it. But people, you know, you were saying they can't read that in a state of cognitive panic.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And so they're like, okay, that's what reality is, but you have to expand the street. You have to make color. You have to dump some of these lines that are meaningless in a state of panic. And it was kind of the moment in some of these higher ups to say, oh, so reality isn't translated. So that's where I feel like it's a perfect way of saying, yes, you are the translator, especially like in panic where people literally have hours to get out. They need to look at something from all walks of life and say, I get it. I know where to go for safety. And I just think that's so powerful.
One thing it's one of my favorite lines that I drop to GIS people, science people, is my maps lie. I said, just letting you know, my maps are the biggest liars. And there's a book called How Maps Lie. And if you superimpose my map with their map, it is the worst accuracy ever. They do not line up. They're all hand drawn. And it's to convince them, and I do convince them. They do understand that necessity for altering reality, and I call it the cognitive visual imprint. So that's just a fancy word for saying, if you see something, so the London Underground Tube, for anyone who's traveled to England and used the color line network, that's the biggest liar on this planet too. That does not match exactly the way the tube lines work underground. But it's one of the most successful models for public transportation, because people can imprint that. Simplify, imprint it. Where do I start? Where do I get off? That's all I need to know. Yeah. And once that theory gets across, then it's understood, oh, that makes sense. So that's usually a big win when I can convince a panel of scientists and GIS people that they allow me to, lie for better understanding.
I was listening and looking up really quick at the same time as you're talking, the South African term Ubuntu, Ubuntu came to mind. So that's what as I was listening to you, which is a quality that includes the essential human virtues, compassion, and humanity. It's basically saying we are all one. And so it's the idea and the concept. And when I'm listening to you and about the access, and I know we got very technical there too, but what I'm hearing you say, the base of all of this, and it sort of brings us, it's okay and it's important for us to understand our own identity. It's also important for us to understand that other people have a separate identity, but we are part of one. We are not an other. We're a part of one group of humanity, and we're trying to move through this together. So that's where the compassion comes in, and the understanding of that. Be okay with who you are, but understand that we don't have to judge this person here, that there's no separation.
Exactly. I mean, that's there's no other, there's no secondary audiences, what we call them. No, they're all at the same level. There's the majority and the minority all at the same level. We have to communicate to all of them just as well and at the same time. So stop treating it like stepstones and, we'll do that in the second phase. It's like you said, is the compassion and the unity I like to call it the tapestry, the quilt. Yeah. We can't, but yes, absolutely.
What would kind of a last thought, because we could talk for days and hours, and I'm picturing entire presentations we can do in class. I mean, we could go change the world, idealists right here. I don't know. My working definition of idealism is that you dream the world can be different, but you act to make it so. There's an action that takes place. And I see that in you so much. That is such a clear, developed virtue in your identity. And that's so beautiful to listen to and to watch. For those of us who are still finding our way with our anchoring and looking, and some of these ideas are new concepts to us, right? Maybe it's new to think about, oh gosh, yeah, inclusivity. What is that? There is something outside my family. Do you have some ideas or thoughts about how to bring that discussion into your family?
I mean, the easiest way is if you have young ones and you sort of just you lead by being a role model. I think that is one way but I could see, that's a tough one. I'm not sure how, for me, when I think about the work I do, sometimes I feel guilty about it. Sometimes I feel like I get a lot of people saying, oh, you're doing good for, you're helping people. But honestly, if I'm being really honest, I feel super selfish, because this question I have about disasters, about vulnerability, about humility, started when I was going back to when I was 9. I'm working that out through my work. This cycle, and I think we all have that. I think somewhere we all have something that we're trying to work out. And I tell my students this also, like, you don't have to choose between passions. I think that's another thing that you don't have to pick one. You don't have to say, I'm going to be this, that you can have these level of interest that find their way to be the one, so I think we're coded to think, what path are you going to take? And that could freeze you up, that you just get paralyzed by not engaging or committing to it. And it took me to almost drown. Yeah, so that's why it's such a hard thing to say, like, how could you bring this back? Permission to take risks, because, you know, me being a forced firefighter at 18, that was perceived as a huge risk to my parents, right? I mean, I could see now being a parent, I'd be like, oh yeah, you're going to art school, you know, but we don't allow each other. And I'm facing that too as a parent, because I'm becoming the parent that's like, don't do that, don't climb the, you know, it's okay to take risks and to keep modeling open-mindedness and compassion, and engage with other people outside your neighborhood, like get, you know, exposure and going out and going to the community, talking to the person, you know, the cashier, you know, just speaking and opening up your mind that way is a great, I think, model. And I'm saying this from the perspective of my own family unit and having really young ones. And that's how we try to emulate that.
Well, I have to say, as an observer, you have an 8 and 5-year-old, and the how they articulate their world and their inclusivity, like you could tell that they're constantly looking for inclusiveness. And I know it's from you and your partner, because you are always asking the question, how does one feel if it was things were taken, you know, like on the playground? And London, you know, she's the one that's she's a protector. Like if it's not right, if not everyone's included, she's going to kind of assert herself and say we need to include others. And so you're role modeling, right? That's all. I just wanted to say, like, something's happening in your family where it's like, wow.
I am. I'm like, oh, that was assertive. that's awesome. That's awesome. You know, you want to pay it forward, get the cycle going upward.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I'm so grateful for this conversation, because I think these are the important conversations and thoughts to have so often. And like I said, we have a situation going on right now in Minneapolis where, I mean, the streets are literally burning because of racism, because of these things that are so ingrained. And there's been fear for so long to invite everybody to the table. And everyone needs to be present, and we need to walk forward in humility, accepting and embracing the fact that we don't know what we don't know.
Exactly.
And that doesn't make us bad people, but that makes us people who respectfully can show up and say, help me learn, help me know. What can I do better? How can I move through this space and make sure everyone, you know, we started this whole thing with identity and tribe, and really when it started it was, you know, trusting your tribe and picking the people around you. But we really do need to focus on the fact that we have the people in our space who help to dictate the energy that we bring to the world. And so choose that wisely, our inner tribe. But we also need to be aware that there is this larger tribe that we are responsible for and need to open our arms to as well. So I've appreciated our time together. Sonja, any thoughts that you have before we close things out?
No, I'm just in awe. Conversation was just amazing. I feel like it's an exhale, inhale of going really close to us as individuals, as families, and to just really thinking about the wider space that we live in and the people in it. So, no, just pretty enlightened. Thank you, sister, for joining us.
Thank you, guys. That was awesome.
No, Claudine, it's wonderful. And actually, I'd like to give a challenge that we could maybe put out on our Instagram page, which is we sort of close thinking about how can we bring inclusivity to our households, how can we make that something that's part of it. You said the role modeling is wonderful. I would love to hear how people are either currently making that a part of their life, share it with us so that we can all become part of the solution, or give us you know what, I have an idea based on what I just heard, so this is what I am going to do. Either one of those, we would love to hear that, because we really are all in this trying to get to that next place together.
The time is right now. It's urgent. I think it's urgent, especially these last couple of days. It's just showing how urgent we need to kind of collaborate and join together. So, all right.
It is. I have hope because things bubble to the top when they're in need of clearing. Yeah. And so I have hope. And Claudine, people like you out there in the world making such a huge difference and helping to inform the rest of us. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
You're
you.
part of the difference.
Oh gosh, hope we can keep that going and get people to trust that passion that they have. And if we could get more people to do that and love what they're doing, and then I think, like you said, Hilary, without hope, we have nothing. I have hope as well.
Sister, I did not know you were going to mention the river, or the Kern River. And I'm going to tell what the real story is. I wasn't there. I was the one like, oh, I don't do that. That's not what I do. She was in, you know, MacGyver, right? Hilary, MacGyver days. Did you watch that?
Yes.
Okay, I was like, oh my God. And so my sister was obsessed with gadgets. Anything gadgety, tools, you know. So they're in line at Kern River, category 4, and the instructor is saying, okay, this is how you're going to cross this river. You got to do it this way. It's a duck dive or something, right? This is my sister telling me, and I still remember the details. During this whole time, my sister's like, look at this cool gadget on my pants. Oh my God, so she's all like thinking about the gadget, and then it was her turn, and she's just like looking around like, huh, okay. So she just dives. So she doesn't duck dive, she just goes for it, and off she goes down. And the funny thing is, there's campers, I don't know how many.
Oh God, yes.
And so my sister is like totally being swept away by these, I'm following. And the campers were kind of looking out and she's like, oh, it's okay, no worries, I'm okay. I was like, she's literally panicking to her death. So
yeah, but you guys don't worry. I'm oh my gosh.
The team back there, yeah. And now, you know, I didn't unbuckle my helmet, zip up my vest, put my fins on. I lost everything in my. But that's called temporary cognitive paralysis.
We lived in Portsmouth and Whiteley.
Oh my gosh, Portsmouth! It's like right. I put a soccer game there.
Right here.
Yeah, sister. Sorry, you're gone. Now
yeah. No kidding.
Yeah.
No, but I wrote children's books coming out of it, having to do with safety. So for a while, my leadership work started by training and going in and working with fire and life safety personnel.
So you did the same thing. That's exactly what I do. It's the same level. It's you know, we pick, and then your audience it's children, knowing how important that is. Yeah. And if people could do more of that, whatever the topic is, that's how we disseminate that. That's how we, you know, model that. That's amazing.
I call sister.
Yeah.
So I will say to her, I'm like, look, sister. And then I'm like, I'm sorry, because that's a thing. I'm sorry.
It's not a thing. Like, I'm like, yes.
It's the tone though. If you're like, look, sister, you're like, holy, but look, sis, that's, you know.
It's a different, yes.